Good morning. Today we'll look at Daniel chapters 3 and 4. Tomorrow is Saturday. I'll be on early. We're going to be in Bismarck for Pride of Dakota show, taking off shortly here after devotion this morning. So those of you who tune in on YouTube, I won't get Friday or Saturday uploaded until Saturday evening when we get back home again. I don't take my computer along to do that. But I sure appreciate each and every one of you that tunes in and listens. It's truly a blessing to me that way. As we look at these two chapters today, King Nebuchadnezzar in chapter 3 makes this golden statue. And I mean, it was common for people to make these golden statues. Remember when the Israelites were led out of Egypt and Moses was up on the mountain, what did they do? They made a golden statue, something to worship, because, we need a God we can see, a God with skin on, so to speak. Well, not skin on, but, at least something solid that we can see rather than this spirit in the sky somewhere. But he makes this huge statue, 60 cubits high and 6 cubits in width, and sets it up out there, and then he makes an order that everyone in the nation, everyone under his rule, when they hear the sound of music, horns, drums, cellos, whatever it might be, he lists them all. But when they hear those, they must bow down and worship this golden idol, this big old statue. And of course, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego don't do that. And, they've been elevated like Daniel. I mean, Daniel, we find out, he's the chief of the magicians because he'd been able to interpret a dream. And these other three Jews, were held fairly high esteem also by the king. And of course, then there's, I imagine some jealousies. But anyway, when all this happens and they're supposed to bow down and worship, well, somebody is noticing that these three Jews aren't following the order. They're not doing what they're supposed to. Somebody was peeking, They weren't bowing down completely and worshiping either. But anyway, they saw that, and they didn't hesitate to go and tell the king. It says, there are certain Jews whom you have, set over the affairs of the province, So here, this is where I get, a little bit of the jealousy idea, But anyway, these Jews, they're not worshiping your idol. They're not worshiping your God. They're worshiping their God. They're doing a terrible thing. They pay no heed to you, O king. And so King Nebuchadnezzar gets mad. It says he's furious in a rage, and he commanded that these three men be brought forward, and he questions them. And they say, yeah, we don't worship your idol, and we're not going to worship your idol. We worship the Lord God of Israel, the true God, and we won't compromise ourselves by worshiping a false God. And makes the king even more upset. And he, part of his decree with having to worship everything was, you're going to be put to death or burned in the furnace or whatever. And so to get rid of these three troublemakers, he tells them, build the fire up 7 times hotter than normal. And I mean, I don't know how they really do that, but it doesn't matter. But they had a hotter fire. He wasn't going to take any chances. And then throw these men into the fire. So he bound them. And he left, they were fully clothed and everything. And, more often they probably would have stripped them naked or nearly naked, and probably a whipping and other things beforehand too. But they get thrown into the fire. And I mean, in my imagination, I always used to just picture them, walking in this tunnel and these other soldiers, throwing them in, but there was, they most likely dropped them in from the opening on the top where the smoke and the heat would go out. But it was so hot that the guards who were in charge of dropping them in were burned and died from the extreme heat. And for whatever reason, the king and others are standing so they can look in the ground level entrance, and they can see King Nebuchadnezzar says there's four men walking in there, but one of them looks like a god, or a son of man who looks like a god. And so they're just walking around in there in this huge hot fire. And King finally hollers for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to come out. And they come out. There's not a hair on their head that's burned or singed. They don't smell of smoke. They have been completely protected from this horribly hot fire by God. And that's just what they had told the king. You know, their statement to the king is just a beautiful statement of faith. He says, O Lord, O king, let him deliver us. But if not, let it be known that we will not serve your gods. We will not worship the golden statue you set up. You know, we believe, we trust that our God has the power to save us. But if he doesn't, we're still okay, because we're not going to worship your God. We're not going to sacrifice who we are. We're not going to compromise our standards. We're not going to worship any God other than God, because this God of Israel said, I am the Lord your God. You shall have no other gods. And they took that to heart. And just, you know, if we could do that, if the people, all the people of the world could have no other gods, if we could simply worship and trust in God, yeah, it would be a much better world. But anyway, they did. They trusted in God. And they said, you know, even if he doesn't save us, you know, we're not going to compromise ourselves. Tremendous, tremendous faith. And they came out, and the king was impressed. I mean, he was just dumbfounded. And he said, truly, the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is the God of all gods, you know. And anyone, and now the new law. The new law is any people, nation, or language that others blaspheme against the gods of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego will be torn from limb. I mean, this is another pretty extreme, you know, the extreme of super hot fire, the extreme of the men not being burned, and well, the commands to begin with, you know, the death if you don't worship. And here now, you're going to be torn from limb to limb if you don't worship, or if you speak against the God of Israel. And then he talks about, you know, the signs and the wonders of the most holy God. And then in chapter 4, he has another dream, you know, and he talks about the dream. I was living at ease in my home and prospering in my palace, and I saw a dream that frightened me, you know. And I mean, we sometimes we get frightened by dreams or by images or by scenarios of what might happen, you know, and we wonder and we worry about those. But he had this horrible dream, and he calls Daniel then to interpret the dream. You know, he's described the dream in verse 18. He says, this is the dream that I saw. Now you, Belteshazzar, Daniel, declare the interpretation, since all the wise men of my kingdom are unable to. You are able, however, because you are endowed with the spirit of the holy gods. So the king recognized in Daniel yet, and in these other three Jews, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, that God is with them. And Daniel really didn't want to tell the king the interpretation of this dream, because it was against the king. That the king, with all of the power and all of the lands and the people that he ruled over right now, you know, he was this great big tree. You know, he was prominent. Everything was going to be taken away from him, and he would find himself living off alone in the desert and sleeping out under the stars, and the dew would, you know, he would be damp with dew in the morning, but there would be a stump, and that stump was that in time again that he would be restored. And this is, you know, in verse 34 of chapter 4, when the period was over, I lifted my eyes to heaven, my reason returned to me. I blessed the Most High and praised and honored the one who lived forever. So this King Nebuchadnezzar, who was a pagan, came to see and worship the most holy God by listening to the witness of these 4 Jewish men. And that's, that's what God would have us do yet. Witness our faith to others. And that's what Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did. And King Nebuchadnezzar came, it says he lifted his eyes to heaven. I blessed the Most High and praised and honored the one who lives forever. And that's what we are to do every day as well. Raise our eyes to God, praise and honor him, and give him thanks.